Hi, my name is Katie Sweetman, and this is my webinar, my latest webinar, Pluto in Aquarius. So we've had a lot of big changes in the astrology lately, and most recently, Pluto went into Aquarius for the first time in 250 years. Yes, 250 years. What does this mean? I mean, why has there been such a huge gap between the last time Pluto was in Aquarius versus now? As opposed to, let's say, the sun going into Aquarius, which happens once a year. And what does this possibly mean? It's sort of this start of a new era. I realize that is a big statement, but we can go back and look at when Pluto has changed signs. That's, depending on how old you are, that's probably been a few times at this point. And the last time Pluto changed signs was 2008. And for some people, that was a sort of a pivotal change in their life. This is not to be like, oh no, what's going to happen? It's just, how do we, sort of witness what Pluto is about? How do we use Pluto? How do we use Pluto as a transformation tool? One of the things I want to stress is that this presentation is not meant to be academic. I could have easily made it academic. I could have brought out charts and figures. We could have looked at ephemeris data of when Pluto was last in different signs and aspects. And maybe there's a part of me that would have enjoyed that as a nerd, but I think we would have lost a lot of the big messaging. And how Pluto is a planet, yes, a planet, at least in the eyes of astrology, maybe not necessarily astronomy, that Pluto is a planet that is an evolutionary planet. And we'll get in the presentation what exactly an evolutionary planet is, what does it do, why is it different than your normal run-of-the-day, run-of-the-mill planets, and how, number two, Pluto gets into the psychic material and how, depending on where Aquarius is in our chart, and maybe you might be in Aquarius if you are watching this webinar, a sun in Aquarius, Aquarius rising, or you have major planets in Aquarius, and it's like, what does this mean, psychic material? Psychic material is anything that's in our blind spots. It's the emotional material, this stuff that's inherited. It could be mom and dad and ancestors. Yes, you have an emotional inheritance from your family, past lives. You don't necessarily have to believe in that, but that's one of the ways that I see Pluto reveal itself. We'll look into a little bit of the esoteric material with Pluto, and what is our, what are the things that we don't want to look at? It could be our rage, it could be our grief, it could be something that is in the way of us being able to express the energy of wherever Pluto has just gone into. It could be career, it could be relationship. And how do we do a work of transformation and reformation? But I will talk about kind of like these bigger social, societal constructs, because it's like we can't ignore the fact that Pluto in Aquarius is both a personal experience and a collective experience. It's personal growth and transformation of consciousness, and so is it for humanity. How is it going to go? I don't know. Hopefully good. I'm not a cynic. I really do believe in humanity, but we've got a powerful tool at our disposal. And one of the things we're going to explore is how possibly Saturn has been giving us some breadcrumbs, some hints, some clues over the past 3 years while Saturn was in Aquarius from March of 2020 until March of 2023. So we have a lot to cover, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on the screen share. So let me just, there we go, there's me. And then we just open up the chat, see all the participants. Okay, now we're good to go. So again, my name is Katie Sweetman, and this is Pluto in Aquarius, a new era, 2023 to 2044. Yes, 2044. It's kind of crazy to think that that is the duration that Pluto is going to be in, and that where we all going to be in 2044. The joke is that we're all going to be robots, but of course not. We're going to be human beings. As I record this is March 29th, 2023. And as I record this, Pluto has only been in Aquarius for a few days since March 23rd, 2023. Again, my name is Katie Sweetman. For those that do not know who I am, I'm an astrologer and psychic medium here in the New York City area. I live right across the Hudson in New Jersey, and I've started empowering astrology way back in 2010 because at the time I felt that there wasn't, space for my voice or the way that I looked at astrology, and especially growing up and reading a lot of old-fashioned astrology books. It didn't necessarily gel with some of the way that astrology was being shared. And I was like, this can't just be it. It can't just be a fate. And for me, I've discovered, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's discovered this, that it really truly is a tool for transformation and growth. And that is why I get to do this all for you and share my passion. And some of you I know are my clients, or you've taken a webinar, and hopefully this has revealed something inside of you. So here's our agenda for today. This is kind of for those that are both watching live and also on the replay, and how we're going to look at what Pluto is, this idea of evolutionary consciousness, shadow and light. We have to really look at this sort of esoteric side to Pluto and how it helps us to do a real work of the soul. I know that's a big statement. Saturn in Aquarius, is it possible that we've been getting some hints, some notes, some breadcrumbs over the past few years? And then we'll do, I'm sure what you all are more interested in, the side-by-side look. So here's your introduction. Let's go back to 2008. And while this presentation isn't necessarily about what we call in astrology mundane astrology, meaning like the events of the world and kind of social geopolitical issues, I think a lot of us can recognize that there was a bit of a shift in the world in 2008. And I think this is a good revelation of what Pluto does. And so in January of 2008, Pluto went into Capricorn for the first time in 250 years. Yes, 250 years. In fact, Pluto went in January, I think it's June, it went back out, went back into Sagittarius. And then by November of 2008, it was back into Capricorn. If you remember your history, 2008, we saw a big shift, a big crash in the financial markets. Again, this is not about, finance and history and or even politics, but for us to see how something like Pluto can affect the world. And it just so happens that Capricorn is the sign of the world. So this is a very different sign than Sagittarius, where it had been since 1995, or even the other signs. And I think this is in the next slide. So what is Capricorn? Well, Capricorn is our structures, it's governance. And so we saw how there began to be this big shift in the structures of our world. This is a macro point, of course. I'm an American. I realize many of you might not be. So this is from, what is the perspective of your own country and even your own personal life, and how you have seen a shift in 2008, because it may be different. But I think the most important thing to point out is, regardless of where you are in the world, is that there are dominant power structures in this world. And that's what Pluto gets to the heart of, dominant power structures, for better and for worse. So Pluto isn't about money. So again, I didn't mean to do a lecture on finance, although I'm a Scorpio. Pluto is about power. And I show cryptocurrency, and a lot of this stuff is presented neutrally. This is not me saying, crypto is good or bad, but it's very interesting that Bitcoin was released in January of 2009. So here we are 15 years later, and really seeing our relationship with money, power, finance, structures, and maybe you have, can go back in your own life and see how your own financial world has shifted in the last 15 years, especially if you are what are called a cardinal sign. Capricorn, again, is a structure that shape and govern our world. Capricorn is what's called a Saturn-ruled sign. If this is a little bit of a technical point for you, the thing that you need to understand in astrology is that each sign of the zodiac has a boss. So the boss of Capricorn is Saturn, and Saturn talks about, again, structures, boundaries, the things that we can touch On in what's called medical astrology, Capricorn is teeth and bones. I know that's not very glamorous, but we need a structure in our body. Otherwise, we would just be soft tissue. So our world does need structure. Structure is just neutral. Pluto just talks about what is the power behind that structure and how it has needed to evolve and reform over the last 15 years. Again, there's also this sense of individual relationship with structure and power, and how maybe you have become more empowered over the last 15 years. It could be something as simple, to use the previous examples, more empowered over your money and financial life, or more empowered in relationship. Did it happen overnight? Probably not. And that's the thing that we're going to get to with Pluto and further in the webinar, is that in order for us to find empowerment, we have to first look at where we are disempowered and do the work of transformation. Does the energy that powers, in the case of Capricorn, structure, does it tear down, or does it transform? And with Pluto and with power, there's two sides to it. Power that can completely move mountains in our lives. It can completely change something for the better, or it can annihilate us. Pluto reveals something that was always there, a corruption that needs to be reformed. And I know that that's a bit of a strong word. And corruption as this, not to put any sort of like, corrupt powers, but just how an energy can be corrupt, meaning it's not supportive of our life. It actually is working against our life. So yeah, corruption is a strong word. And I don't know if that was, kind of hit something in you, but we have inside of us a version of ourselves. It's called the shadow. It's a psychological term, but that can sometimes work against us. And so I'm just letting people in. So there may be area of our lives where the energy is unconsciously corrupt. And I put unconsciously in italics because unconscious means that we don't realize it. We don't see it. It's completely either we don't want to see it, and that happens. We put ourselves into illusions, and and this even could be in relationships, and this happens every day, maybe not to necessarily big effect, but we don't always see the thing about the other person in our relationship. We kind of gloss over it, but it's an energy, it's a toxic energy, or it's an unsupportive energy. And Pluto says, oh, you want to have a relationship? Well, first I'm going to show you what's in the way, for example. And that's where we have to start to see something that we haven't seen before or haven't wanted to see before. So this is an example. Maybe you have a tendency to keep repeating a pattern in a relationship. And it's like, why does this keep happening? Is there a sign over my head? Like, do I kind of keep attracting certain types of mates? Or maybe it's not just romantic relationship. It's also interpersonal relationship, your relationship with power and authority and your boss. I have a client who had Pluto going through what's called his 10th, which is career. And he had been in like the highest reaches of government, at least in this country, and kept attracting toxic bosses in his life. And it got to this point where we're having this conversation. He's kind of really caught in the energy. I'm really trying to get to the heart of like, what is Pluto trying to reveal for him? And I asked him, well, who's Pluto? Let me rephrase that. Who is this toxic boss truly? Because that's the thing with Pluto, is that Pluto will act as an avatar. Meaning, when I asked him that question, I was like, who is your boss really? Because it's not your boss, it's an energy. And we sort of worked it back that it was actually a manifestation of his father and how he was working out unconsciously issues with his father. And maybe the father was, had issues with anger and power and authority. So that's where Pluto really does its work and actually can be really powerful work, because when we realize that, then we can make a change. Then we can make a choice. Pluto shows us what has been at the heart of a power structure that runs parts of our lives, depending on where Capricorn is. So this is over the last 15 years. What is the power source of family, home, past, memory? In the case of the example I just gave you a few moments ago, what's the power source behind your relationship with authority, command, or responsibility? Is it toxic parent? Is it something else? And Pluto can also, and this maybe is a little bit of a larger topic, get into themes about trauma. I don't want to say that Pluto makes trauma happen or to necessarily pathologize Pluto, but Pluto is just trying to expose something within us so it can be transformed and reformed. That's the personal level. Collective level is trying to expose something on a societal and humanity level so it can be transformed and reformed. This isn't just our unconscious emotional material. This is also our blocks, although you could argue that blocks are unconscious emotional material. It's like, what is your block to healthy relationship? What is your block to being able to be in a position of authority? What is your block with your connection to friends, humanity, feeling like you belong in the world? And so Pluto gives you the power to start to reveal and to move and to shift that unconscious psychic material. And it's not always unconscious. Sometimes it's a fear, but sometimes we have to dig even more to understand what is behind the fear. Because sometimes we can identify with things and unconsciously identify with things. And that's why it's a block, because it's like, what happens if this leaves my life? Then who am I, for example? So now, as of 2023, March of 2023, the story is starting to change. It will take about a year and a half until November of 2024 for Pluto to completely into Aquarius. Pluto goes into Aquarius fully on November 19th of 2024. I say fully because Pluto moves so slow that like it only creeps into Aquarius for a few months. It's going to leave again on June 11th of 2023. It goes back in January 2024. It goes back into Capricorn in September 2024, and then November of 2024. It's fully in. And so that area of our life is going to start to demand our attention. Is it going to demand our attention like full on for 20 years? No, because Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for 20 years, but what it's initiating us into a story. And so I think it's really important for us to pay attention. What is the story? And for some of us, it could be very subtle. You know, that's sometimes the beauty and the frustration of astrology is that it makes more sense in hindsight. What is the story that's starting to initiate for you? Just take notes, observe, don't come to any conclusions. You know, as we come from March 23rd, 2023 to May 1st, 2023 is when Pluto turns retrograde. And then it goes back into Capricorn on June 11th. Because that sense of initiation or that sense of story, because Pluto brings us into something, and Pluto talks really about that mythology of, you know, kind of being brought into something. I know it's a little intense. I'm a Scorpio, by the way, of Pluto bringing us into the underworld. And that's not to say that this is going to be a difficult or negative experience, but we are being brought into something so that we can see something, transform something. Persephone, in that sort of act of being forcefully brought into the underworld, transforms into the queen. She goes from Persephone in the Greek myth to Kori, the queen of the underworld. So it's for us to start to really pay attention to what is being revealed to us at this time. What is Aquarius? And I think it's really important that we don't get a little too much into this pop culture definition of Aquarius, you know, kind of age of Aquarius, peace and love, everything's going to be great. I remember when Pluto, and I mean, not in the beginning of when Pluto went into Capricorn, because I was a baby astrologer at the time, but I had this friend, he was always like, can't wait till Pluto goes into Aquarius. And I was like, just you wait. Because we think Aquarius equals peace and love. We need to understand that in every sign of the zodiac, there's highs and lows. There's highs and lows in Capricorn. Capricorn is like, I've built something, it's rock solid, and hopefully it's powered by something that is creative and transformative and positive in this world, as opposed to the opposite. Aquarius is the second to last sign of the zodiac. The zodiac is symbolic of the wheel of life. So when we get towards the end, it's not about the personal, it's about the collective. And Aquarius talks about the systems, both the social systems and the networks that govern our world. It is a very intellectual sign, ideological sign. It's what's called a fixed air sign. So this is this idea of like the ideas that shape humanity. So there's going to be shifts in the ideas that shape humanity, the systems and networks that govern our world, technology, science, because Aquarius, it does speak about technology and science, but also our vision for the future. And then Aquarius, in its best capacity, is that very utopian, I think, peace and love ideal that we yearn for. I'm a little bit of a not a cynic, I'm a little bit more of a Scorpio, but I think that there is always that potential. How do we start to build something better, personally and collectively, over the next 10, 20 years? So as I said, this is going to start to shift something on a societal, technological, and world level. Aquarius is not a personal sign. And maybe this is a little bit of a technical point, but both Capricorn and Aquarius are what are called Saturn-ruled signs. And then what I've noticed, just going back the past couple of cycles, is that the dominant power structure at the start of Saturn going into Capricorn is not the dominant power structure at the end. So who's the dominant power structure? This is a little bit of a European perspective. Who's the dominant power structure at the start of the 15 Catholic Church, at least in Europe? Who's the dominant power structure by the time Pluto leaves Aquarius in the 1540s? Not the Catholic Church. You start to have the Reformation and things start to change. There's religious wars. And that maybe you could say the same for who's the dominant power structure in the 1760s when Pluto goes into Capricorn. Who's the dominant power structure by the time Pluto leaves Aquarius in, I think it's 1797. So something is shifting about the power structure, but it's relevant to its timeline. This is why I think we can't overly rely on history, because I've seen some memes on Instagram about how Pluto was in Aquarius during the French Revolution. It's going to be this revolution. I don't know. I mean, Uranus was in Leo at the time of the French Revolution. You had a Pluto-Uranus square, and maybe that was that, or maybe it was because Uranus was discovered in 1781. But I think humanity was very different back then, and so our relationship with Pluto and Aquarius this time is going to be reflective of this time, this humanity, this level of social conscious, personal consciousness, collective consciousness, and having to do a work. So it's going to be very interesting. And you could argue that because Pluto has just gone into Aquarius, we're only halfway through the story. We have to really see where we're at on a macro level, on a humanity level, by the time Pluto gets to the end of Aquarius in almost 2044. But this is about these bigger brush strokes. This is also about the personal stuff, and we have to completely transform the structure. It's like Aquarius on a macro level is society and humanity, but if you bring that down to a personal level, it's the same transit. It's just compressed or smaller in your personal life. And so what is the power structure? What is the dominant power structure in relationships? Oh, I always let the other person take the lead. I have no agency. I have no power. Okay, what's the dominant power structure by the time Pluto leaves your relationship sign? Maybe it's going to look very different. So this is for you to really reflect on. Like, again, this is not necessarily a presentation about, you know, these sort of larger social issues and humanity. It's more about how does this manifest inwardly in your own personal sphere, and how does it start to make a change in a very particular part of your chart, depending on where Aquarius is in your astrology. And if you're saying, I have nothing in Aquarius, great. But Aquarius is a very particular part of your chart. It governs a part of your life depending on your sun sign and your rising sign. So over this time, but also on a personal level, we have to work through our unconscious blocks. What is your unconscious blocks around using your voice, or really standing in your power, or really going after what you want, desire, relationship, money? You know, what's your relationship with individuality and really taking yourself seriously? And maybe there are unconscious blocks at this point. You don't even see these things, but Pluto will show you them over the coming years. It's the real work of the soul. You don't necessarily have to believe in a soul. I do. And how does Pluto start to reveal the deeper emotional, psychic, and spiritual material that has its threads to different times and different spaces and different iterations of you? And how can you, let's say, lighten yourself so that hopefully you don't have to work so hard in the next life? Because, and this is a little bit of a spiritual point, you incarnated in this lifetime so that you could live through Pluto and Capricorn and Aquarius. This is 40 years almost of time where your soul needed to do a lot of that work on the Saturn energy. And here you are, you're halfway through the story. It depends on our level of consciousness. And I wanted to make this point because Pluto is not going to be a one-size-fits-all transit. And you're thinking, of course not. And we're all individuals. Yes, there will be a shared theme for each of the signs. But your relationship with what Pluto is trying to reveal to you is very personal. And you have to understand that consciousness is your ability. It's not memory. It's not, you know, your past. It's how something is revealed and opened up inside of you. And if you've ever had that moment where you feel like the huge light bulb goes off, or, you know, somebody has sort of rung your bell, you have all these different phrases in English, it's because something shifted and moved inside of you, and you saw something, and something clicked, and something made sense. And for some people, they have no sense of who they are. And so Pluto is actually trying to reveal something over the coming years. Then again, Pluto helps to reveal consciousness, putting light where there's shadows. That's the work with Pluto. We look where something has been obscured, something has been, and put this in air quotes, corrupted. And how do we put light on it? Meaning, when we realize something, we have that big aha, we have to make a choice. What do we do about it? If you've ever had that big sort of like lightning strike of a realization, and then had been scared because you knew that to go after or to do what you realized in that moment means to change your life. I've seen it happen before. Some people are like, nope, I'm just going to keep everything the same. And then, you know, that means we're going against ourselves. And I realize it's not easy. It's not easy to change your life, to walk away from something, to take that risk, to be yourself. But I think Pluto doesn't go away, and Pluto's going to keep knocking on the door, so to speak.